Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles.
You start to feel it long before you admit it. That slow hollowing out, the way conversations turn into logistics, the way your name sounds less like something she enjoys saying and more like an obligation. It had been happening for a while, quietly, almost politely. She'd get home later, start drinking more, excuse it with stress, or just say she needed to unwind. Nights we used to spend together became nights she spent scrolling, half listening, smiling at her phone in ways I hadn't seen directed at me in months. I didn't question it at first. I think maybe it's just a phase. That night wasn't supposed to be different. I made dinner, kept her plate warm, watched some old show reruns until I dozed off on the couch waiting. When I heard the door open, it was almost 1 a.m. The lock clicked, then her heels against the hardwood, unsteady and slow. I stayed still, eyes closed, pretending to be asleep, but my chest felt tight with something I couldn't quite name yet. She came in laughing to herself. That kind of loose, glassy laugh that doesn't sound real. Dropped her purse by the door, kicked off her shoes with a loud sigh, and muttered something under her breath. I opened my eyes just as she collapsed onto the couch opposite mine. She didn't even notice me at first. Just flopped down, head back, arms out, the smell of gin clinging to her like perfume. Her mascara had smeared a little under one eye, and her dress strap had slipped off her shoulder, but she didn't care enough to fix it. I waited, thinking she'd see me, maybe say something about being out late again. Instead, she mumbled, more to the ceiling than to anyone in the room. "You know," she slurred, voice thick and dragging, "I only married you because I was bored." That was it. No build-up. Just a lazy confession said like it didn't mean anything. I blinked slowly, heart thudding, but I didn't move. I wanted to believe I misheard. That she said something else, and I just twisted the syllables into that because I was tired or paranoid. But she kept talking aimlessly now, not realizing I was awake. "Thought marriage would be exciting, you know?" she said. I still closed, a faint smile curling her lips. "But turns out, it's all just boring." Then she laughed again. A soft, bitter laugh that died off in her throat as she reached for the half-empty glass on the coffee table and took another sip. I sat up, slowly, quietly, and she finally turned her head. Blinked once. Took a second longer than it should have to recognize me. "Oh," she said, with a smirk. "Didn't know you were still up." Didn't know. Or didn't care. I nodded once, not trusting myself to speak. There was no point in starting a fight with someone who didn't even realize they'd just ended the marriage for you. She leaned her head back again, closed her eyes. "You take things too seriously," she added. That one stung more than the first. Because it was so dismissive, so casual, like my presence in the room, in her life, barely registered. She was already somewhere else in her mind, drifting in whatever fantasy made more sense than the life we had built together. I looked at her for a long time. I could still remember how she used to light up when I walked through the door. How we used to cook together and laugh until midnight over nothing. I remembered the trip to Savannah, the first snowfall at our old apartment, the way she used to bury her face in my chest when she couldn't sleep. And now she couldn't even look at me without that smile of contempt curling at the edge of her mouth. I stood slowly and walked past her without saying anything. In the hallway, I paused, staring at the framed photo of us on the wall. Her hand on my chest, our faces pressed close together. We looked happy, or maybe just convincing. In the bathroom, I ran the tap and splashed cold water on my face. My reflection looked tired, not just from that night, but from years of waiting for something to change. I dried my hands and leaned against the counter, breathing in the silence that stretched through the house like a warning. When I came back out, she was asleep, curled awkwardly on the couch, one arm hanging off the edge. The empty glass was tipped over, and a dark stain had spread across the rug. She looked peaceful in the way only someone who didn't carry regret could look. I sat back down on the opposite couch and stared at the ceiling. I wasn't angry. Not in the way you yell or throw things. It was something colder. Still, like a door quietly closing. And I knew that something in me had finally given up. In clarity. And what came next wouldn't be loud or messy. It would be simple, final, and quiet enough for her not to hear until I was already gone. I didn't sleep. Not a minute. I sat there as the hours dragged past, listening to the dull hum of the fridge and the ticking clock on the wall. Every so often, she stirred, mumbled something incoherent, shifted positions, kicked her heels off with a soft thud. But mostly, she slept like the world owed her peace. My mind didn't stop. I stared at the ceiling, then the walls, then down at my own hands. Everything looked the same, but it all felt different. Like I had walked into someone else's house and found pieces of my life laid out in the wrong order. Nothing fit anymore. It's strange, the things that surface in moments like that. I remembered the way she looked on our wedding day. Nervous smile, trembling fingers clutching her bouquet. She couldn't meet my eyes for long, but I thought it was just nerves. I remembered our honeymoon, the cheap hotel with the leaky faucet, how we laughed about it, and said we'd tell the story for years. I remembered the way she used to squeeze my hand under restaurant tables, just to feel close. None of it matched the woman passed out on the couch now. And if I was honest with myself, it hadn't for a long time. Somewhere between then and now, she stopped needing me for anything that mattered. I became part of the background, reliable, expected, replaceable. She made decisions without me, bought things we didn't need, took trips with her friends, and came home distant. I chalked it up to stress, figured we were just in a rough patch. But the rough patch had become the normal. And now I knew why. She wasn't unhappy. She was indifferent. She simply didn't think about me at all. I'd been holding on to a version of her that hadn't existed in years. And I realized then, sitting in that living room surrounded by the ruins of a life I tried so hard to build, that I had become the last person in the room to wake up. I looked over at her again. She'd slid down into the cushions, hair messy, one arm bent awkwardly under her head. I wondered how she'd react when she woke up. Would she even remember what she said? Would she pretend it never happened? Would she laugh it off as some drunken nonsense? None of it mattered anymore. She had already told me the truth, even if the alcohol just gave her the nerve to say it out loud. I stood slowly, careful not to make a sound, walked into our bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. The sheets were rumpled from her rushing to get ready earlier. Her makeup bag still sat open on the dresser, a trail of powders and lipsticks scattered beside it. I opened the drawer where I kept the ring box. Not the one I gave her, the one I had saved mine in. Slid it out and held it in my palm. It felt heavier than I remembered, the symbol of everything I thought we were. I had already done that, quietly, over the years, each time she rolled away in bed, each time she canceled plans without explanation, each time she looked at her phone instead of at me. The grief had come in doses so small, I barely noticed until I was drowning in it. And now I wasn't grieving anymore. I was just done. I packed a small duffel. A few shirts, a pair of jeans, socks. Left the rest. The books, the tools, the souvenirs from vacations she barely remembered. I didn't need them. None of it had meaning anymore. When I walked back into the living room, it was still dark outside. The faintest hint of light had started to creep in through the blinds, casting long shadows across the floor. She hadn't moved. On the counter by the fridge, I set the ring down. Then the keys, both house and car. She could keep them. I wasn't coming back for either. She always joked that I was the stable one, the predictable one, the man who always came home. Not this time. As I stepped out the front door, the morning air hit me harder than I expected. Cold and still, with that strange calm that only shows up right before the world starts to stir. I stood there for a moment, staring up at the slowly brightening sky, hands in my jacket pockets. It was the kind of silence that doesn't ask questions. It just waits. And then I walked down the steps. Not rushed or hesitant, just steady. With every step, I felt lighter. Not happy, just clear. Because when someone tells you, even in a drunken whisper, that you were never wanted for the right reasons, believe them. Especially if they say it without flinching. And when that clarity comes, it doesn't demand an argument or closure. So I moved toward whatever came next. The motel I picked wasn't far. Just off the highway, past a strip of shuttered gas stations and empty parking lots. Nothing special, just a square building with flickering neon and curtains too thin to block out the sun. But it was quiet, and that was all I needed. The front desk clerk didn't ask questions. Just slid over a key card after I handed over a 50, eyes barely lifting from the small TV behind the counter. I nodded a thank you and climbed the narrow stairs to the second floor, each step feeling like another inch of distance from the life I had just left. Inside the room, the air was stale, something between bleach and old smoke, but I didn't mind. I dropped my bag on the bed, sat on the edge, and stared at the floor for a while. My shoes still tracked in dirt from the front yard. I kicked them off slowly, then leaned back against the headboard and let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding since I walked out. It was quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't wait for you to speak. No text pinging, no questions about dinner, no footsteps from the other room. Just the hum of an old air conditioner and the faint whoosh of cars passing outside. For the first time in what felt like years, I wasn't waiting for the next disappointment. I didn't fall asleep right away. My body was exhausted, but my mind kept going, sorting through the wreckage I'd been living in like it finally had permission to start cleaning up. There were no explosive moments or shattering betrayals. Just the slow erosion of connection. The thousand little dismissals, the subtle looks, the tired sighs every time I tried to talk about us. I remembered the times she'd come home late without explanation, or cancel plans because something more important had come up. At first, I thought I could win her back. That if I just worked harder, gave more, stayed patient, she'd turn toward me again. But people don't drift away because they're waiting for you to pull them back. They drift because they've already turned the other way. I used to tell myself love meant sticking around, even when it was hard. That real commitment wasn't about grand gestures, but staying when it was uncomfortable. I believed that with everything I had. And maybe that's why it took me so long to realize I wasn't in a marriage anymore. I was just a placeholder, keeping things running while she decided what her next move would be. I rolled over and stared at the ceiling. There was a crack in the plaster that ran across the middle like a scar. Funny how even ceilings carry stories. Around noon, my phone buzzed. One message. From her. Where are you? No emotion. Just flat words on a screen. I read it twice. Then set the phone down and didn't answer. What would I even say? That I finally listened? That for the first time in years, I chose me? Instead, I got up, splashed cold water on my face, and stared at my reflection. I looked older than I remembered. Not just tired, worn. Like I'd been trying to hold something together that never stood a chance. I dressed slowly, then left the room to grab a coffee from the vending machine near the stairwell. The sun was high by then, and the air was warming up, but it didn't feel like a new day. I stood outside, sipping the bitter coffee, watching people pass by in their cars, headed somewhere, probably late and stressed. And for once, I didn't feel like I was racing to catch up with anyone. She texted again later. Did you leave? Still no emotion. Just confusion that the thing she never thought would happen was happening. She had spent years believing I'd never go. That no matter what she said or did, I'd still be there. Still cooking dinner. Still taking care of the car, the bills, the plans she forgot to make. But now the rhythm was broken. The silence she used to ignore had become the answer she never expected. I didn't reply. I lay back down, letting the noise of the road fill the room. She'd be waking up properly now. The house would feel different. Quieter. Colder. She might notice the ring on the counter. Or the missing keys. Maybe not right away. She was always slower in the mornings. But eventually, it would click. And for the first time, I didn't care how that made her feel. Because everything I used to fear, losing the house, starting over, being alone, it didn't scare me anymore. I'd already been alone, right next to her, night after night, pretending not to notice the way she drifted further with every passing day. Now, finally, she could have the silence she'd been cultivating all this time. And I could have the peace I'd almost forgotten existed. The next message came a few hours later. Are you seriously doing this? No warmth either, just annoyance in plain text. The kind that drips from someone used to being accommodated. That subtle shift from confusion to irritation, like she'd misplaced her phone charger, not her husband. I didn't respond. Instead, I watched the steam from my second cup of coffee curl toward the ceiling. A cheap plastic stirrer sat in the cup, bobbing slightly. The TV in the room was on, muted, some daytime talk show blaring gestures and smiles with no sound. Background noise for a day I didn't need filled. There were no calls. She wasn't one to chase. Not when it meant losing the upper hand. But the silence must have gotten to her, because by early evening, she sent another text. If this is about what I said last night, it didn't mean anything. I was drunk. Still no apology. Just a line meant to close the door on responsibility. I could almost hear her saying it, arms crossed, waiting for me to be reasonable again. For me to return to the same role I always played. Peacemaker, fixer, forgiver. I set the phone back down on the nightstand and stared at the ceiling again. Same cracked line, same musty scent hanging in the air. But my breathing felt easier now. The tension that had lived in my shoulders for years, always there, coiled and ready, was loosening. I remembered how many times I had excused things before. How many evenings I'd written off as just a bad day. How many times I convinced myself that her distance was temporary, that one day she'd come back to me fully. But what she said wasn't some drunken fluke. Alcohol doesn't invent things, it just unmasks them. And what she said was what she felt. The tone, the emptiness behind it, that was honest. She married me because she was bored, not because she loved me or she saw a future. Because I was convenient and I stayed. And somewhere along the way, I stopped being a partner and became a placeholder. The phone buzzed again. This is childish. I smiled for the first time that day. Because it was familiar. That was her rhythm. Deny, dismiss, deflect. Frame any reaction as an overreaction. Make sure the problem was never hers to carry. But this wasn't a tantrum. It was release. I wasn't at that motel to punish her. I wasn't trying to make a point or force a response. I was just done. And the more her messages came in, the more obvious it became that she had no idea what it felt like to be on the other end of quiet. When I was the one waiting for a reply or some sign of care, the hours stretched out like punishment. But now, the silence between us felt like freedom. No longer a leash, just distance, honest and deserved. That night, I took a walk. The motel backed up to a thin patch of woods, nothing dense, just a few trees struggling between the concrete. I wandered past them until I reached a field of tall grass, the wind pushing through it in slow waves. I stood there a while, letting the breeze brush past my face, hands tucked in my jacket pockets, trying to remember the last time I felt this calm. It had to be years. Years since I walked without hurrying. Since I stood still without wondering what else I should be doing. Since my thoughts weren't tangled with someone else's moods. There was no cinematic flash of inspiration. Just air. Just me. Back at the room, another message waited. So this is who you are now. As if choosing myself was some kind of betrayal. But I didn't respond to that one either. I lay down on the bed, turned off the lamp, and let the dark settle around me. She'd wake up tomorrow with the same question she started the day with. Where are you? But she wasn't really asking about my location. She was asking why the thing she thought she could always count on suddenly wasn't there. Why the man who bent over backwards didn't fold this time. Because for the first time, she was the one sitting in silence. And I was the one who didn't know anyone in answer. The days pass. She calls, this time with a different tone. Less bite, more pause between words. Like she's not sure how to approach me anymore. The first voicemail comes 2 mornings after I left. I don't answer. Just let it ring out while I sip motel coffee and stare at the parking lot outside my window. She sounds tentative, almost rehearsed. Hey, I think we should talk. I didn't mean what I said that night. Can we just clear the air? It's not rage anymore. It's realization. But I don't call back. Not out of spite. Just clarity. What needs clearing when the damage isn't in the words, but in the years leading to them? The next call comes that evening. She doesn't leave a message. I picture her sitting on the couch, scrolling through her contacts, hoping the phone will buzz before she finishes dialing. When it doesn't, she hangs up. I can almost hear her pacing, unsure of how to navigate the silence now that she's on the receiving end of it. It's easy to ignore someone who never walks away. But once they're gone, all that empty space becomes sharp. 2 more days. No calls. Then one, late at night. This time I listen. I was drunk, and I said something I didn't mean. You know that, right? Her voice cracks, then steadies. You've always been the one who understands. I don't know why you're doing this now. That word, now, like the clock hasn't been ticking for years. As if the last decade hadn't already been chipping away at the foundation she assumed would never crack. She leaves another voicemail the next morning. Less pleading, more confusion. You're really not coming back? And for a brief second, I feel it. That instinct. The one trained by years of holding the peace, keeping the boat steady. The one that wants to explain, soften, reassure. But I let it pass. Because that instinct isn't love. It's reflex. And reflex alone doesn't save anything. By the end of the week, she texts again. Shorter this time. If this is really what you want. It is. I find a small place on the other side of town. Month-to-month lease. Nothing fancy, just a second-floor unit with clean carpets and a balcony that gets decent morning light. I furnish it with what I need. A bed, a chair, a coffee maker. I bring no pictures, no remnants from the old house. That part of my life stays closed. Work continues. I keep my head down. No big announcements. I tell a few close friends what happened, and their reactions are all the same, a slow, quiet nod. As if they saw it coming before I did, but waited for me to get there on my own. She calls once more. The last time. This time, there's no defense in her voice. Just a soft, tired version of her I haven't heard in years. I miss you. I listen. Because she deserves at least that. Her voice breaks when she says my name. She starts to explain about the drinking, about feeling lost, about how she never meant for things to fall apart. She says she thought I'd always be there, that she thought time would fix what distance made blurry. But the thing about time is it doesn't heal what's actively ignored. I stay silent until she's finished. Then I say the one thing I've been holding on to. I'm not angry, but I'm not coming back. She doesn't reply right away. There's just a quiet, trembling breath. Then the call ends. That night, I sit out on my small balcony, legs stretched out, watching headlights pass below. It's not peace in the fairy tale sense. But there's, after what I've lived through, feels like freedom. The next morning, I contact my lawyer. There's no final confrontation. Just paperwork, signed, dated, filed. Clean and simple. The divorce initiation is mine, not as punishment, not as a statement, just a conclusion. And when the documents are sent off, I don't feel regret. I don't feel vindicated. I just feel finished. She'll receive them in a few days. She'll probably sit with them longer than she should, wondering if I'll change my mind, wondering if I'm still the man who used to fold her laundry and turn down the bed at night even when she didn't say thank you. But I won't. Because that version of me, the one who waited, who stayed, left the moment she whispered her truth through gin-soaked lips. I only married you because I was bored. She thought I'd forget it. But what she didn't understand was that some words don't echo. They settle. They root. And eventually, they grow into something solid enough to walk away on. So I walked. And this time, I didn't look back.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.